Hello. We are in Mark's Gospel, chapter 13. And hey, here's the parable of the fig tree again. We already spent some time looking at the parable of the fig tree, but let's take a read and maybe we'll just continue on forward after this. It says, "Now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branches have already become tender and it puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So you also, when you see these things happening, know that it is near at the doors. Surely I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away." So, Jesus is letting them know some of the signs of the times. And you can take this in two different ways, and I actually think you could take it in both. It's not necessarily an either or. In Matthew 24, our parallel passage, when he talks about the signs of the times, and he talks about people coming and declaring to be the Christ, and he talks about wars and rumors of wars, he talks about nation rising against nation, famines, pestilence, earthquakes in various places, and all these things are the beginning of sorrows. So for one, we see the conditions in the earth. And if you look around and you look at the earthquakes, the pestilence, would you believe it that there could be illnesses that could wreak havoc over the entire world? As these things are happening, he says these are signs that we should be looking for and waiting for. And on top of that, the fact that he's using this fig tree for his analogy. Now, back in chapter 11, we spent some time there not too long ago. First, as he's walking to Jerusalem from Bethany, so he's coming down the Mount of Olives, there's this fig tree. And he goes to see if there's any figs, but there are none. And so he curses the fig tree. And they leave, and they return. And the next day, they find the fig tree dried up from the roots, it says. So this is, just like a normal something happened to it. I mean, this thing is just withered and shriveled overnight. And he tells them that, hey, what's up with this fig tree? Well, it didn't have the fruit he was looking for. So throughout the Bible, we see three different plants used to represent Israel. Let's see here. Do I even have my notes on this somewhere? I might have it somewhere. This generation, fig tree. Maybe I have it written somewhere else. Curious where I have that written down. Somewhere I had a bunch of cross references in my Bible, but of course I have to know where in my Bible I'm looking to find them all. But the idea is, maybe it's right here. Fig tree. Hosea 9:10, Jeremiah 8:13, Matthew 21:19. Yeah, all those things right there. But what we find is that Israel is a fig tree, Israel as an olive tree, Israel as a grapevine. And so the three of these symbols represent Israel in different ways. And we see the nation of Israel, we see the ethnic people of Israel, and then we see, spiritual Israel, and really civil as a nation. We have the fig tree. And he goes and he doesn't find any fruit on this tree. So he curses it. And what we find is Israel ceased to be a nation not too long after this. Within 40 years, Rome would come and wipe them all out, as Jesus prophesied at the beginning of this day when he's doing the Olivet Discourse, that not one stone would stand upon another. And Israel ceased to become a nation. Now, fast forward almost 2,000 years, and Israel is back in the land. Now, we're watching as prophecy is being fulfilled, because even 100 years before Israel's back in the land, and I'm sure more than that, but as I think I mentioned before, somewhere right around there and maybe there on my bookshelf, and probably actually some up there, I've got commentaries on the book of Revelation written before 1900. So 19th century commentaries. And these authors who, Israel being a nation is just nowhere on the horizon as far as the world political scene. But they believed that Israel would become a nation, and they taught it. It's one thing for us today, pastors, well, look, Israel's a nation. I mean, it's really easy for us to point this out. But those guys, in faith, George Mueller used to make gospel tracts in faith, saying God will restore Israel as a nation. I even have a really good Spurgeon quote somewhere where Spurgeon talks about how he's just saying, it says it right here, and so I must believe, that Israel will be back in the land. So those guys did it in faith. Well, now we're seeing the reality of it. And so Israel is back. We're seeing prophecies fulfilled. These are the signs of the times. Now, one thing that's interesting about this generation is people quite often, try and come up with, well, we can timeline this, the end's got to be right around here because there's this many years in a generation or this many years in a generation. The Greek word there for generation, it's also the same Greek word for it's ethnos. It's an ethnic people group. So at the same time, I don't think we can pinpoint necessarily by trying to exactly determine a generation, because I think Jesus' main point was that Israel will never go away. That this generation, these people, this ethnic group, they'll never go away. There's no getting rid of them, which again is a pretty profound prophetic word, considering that no other people group ever throughout history has been so spread abroad, kicked out this way and that way, and yet for some miraculous reason they have maintained their ethnic identity. When we look at like the Native Americans in America, they have been put onto Indian reservations and this, that, and the other, and many of them have forgotten their languages, forgotten their traditions, and just over 200 years we're seeing the potency of their culture diminishing, because it's just reality. That's what's happened to every nation that has been displaced. Mark Twain, an unbeliever, and written well before Israel was in the land, he said the Egyptians, the Babylonians, and Persians rose, filled the planet with splendor and sound, and then faded to dream stuff and passed away. The Greeks and Romans followed and made a vast noise, and then they were gone. Other people have sprung up, held the torch high for a time, but it burned out, and they sit in twilight now and have vanished. The Jew saw them all, survived them all, and is now what he always was, exhibiting no decadence, no infirmities of age, no weakening of his parts, no slowing of his energies, no dulling of his alert but aggressive mind. All things are mortal but the Jews, and all forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality? So there's something there that we can see in prophecy, that God's people Israel are still with us, and things continue to line up. I'm sure in the 19th century, 1800s, some of these pastors that I said I've got some Revelation commentaries from were probably mocked as fools. You really think that after thousands of years, somehow the Jews are going to regain the promised land? And they were probably mocked. Today, I get some mockery from Christians who think it's foolish to think that a temple will get built again. You really think that there's going to be a third Jewish temple? And yet, you go to Israel and you can go and see the pieces. You can see the menorah already built. You can see the components of all the things that they need, the priestly outfits, you name it, it's all there. It's all ready. Stones are being set aside to build this temple. They're just waiting for someone who's going to open the door and allow them to build it. And if you ask many of the Orthodox Jews today who their Messiah will be, well, he's going to be the one who allows them to rebuild their temple. But in order for that to happen, there'd have to be some serious diplomacy taking place. Perhaps a covenant with many for 7 years. We don't know for sure, but there's definitely some foreshadowing going on right now. So what does Jesus say? When you see these things happening, know that it is near and at the doors. We should be looking around and realizing the end is near, it's at the doors, and all of this stuff has got to happen first. All these things we're seeing before the end comes. And that's also one last reason why I think Jesus is coming, and that's what we need to be focusing on. We're not supposed to be waiting for take that back, here we go. We're not supposed to be waiting for the Antichrist. We're not supposed to be waiting for the temple. We're not supposed to be waiting for the abomination of desolation. We're not supposed to be waiting for, we're supposed to be waiting for Jesus, which is why I think he's coming for us first. Because if he wasn't coming first, then I'd be waiting for all that other stuff. So, be waiting for Jesus and be ready for Jesus so that when he comes, you're ready to go with no regrets. All right. You guys take care, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Adios.